Good afternoon, friends. This is August 23rd, 2020, and what I'm going to do today, you can decide if you want to be doing this. Are you following the School of Tomorrow much? Like the most recent video, just the last one, was a 45-minute walk through a slide deck. And I've done that quite a bit. This morning, I've done that before. This morning, I woke up, tuned in Mr. Jerry Croth here, listening to him talk about. He's trying to psychoanalyze people's news watching habits, or more than news watching, news. What do you call it? Creating. Like he's looking at people who help dish out public media. The thing is, though, I think, like, what is the ratio? Do you need everyone to be aware of what's going on, and how many people do you need watching on the internet? And I don't know, I'm not the authority, but I'm just saying maybe it's okay if a lot of people aren't watching me or Jerry Croth or any of this stuff on YouTube. I'm just talking about the population of YouTube broadcasters, because that's a big place now where people get their information. I'm just saying. So I don't think we can talk intelligibly about where information's flowing and how it's flowing if we just talk about like cable news or something like that. That's the old days. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about this time regarding the School of Tomorrow is I'm going to dive into scheduling especially. Because what I just talked about is like, oh, I woke up and I watched these YouTubes, and YouTubes are important to me and to a lot of us. Okay, fine. Now, where does that connect to my curriculum? Well, you've heard me ranting that if you're serious about education, you're going to give like high school age kids the ability to make YouTubes, and that entails access to the right equipment. Oh, did I bring it up here? I was going to, yes, I have it. Show and tell time. I promised I'd bring this up sometime. One laptop per child star. The old XO is the power supply. Now, I have talked about how there's kind of a pirate-looking skull and crossbones aspect. If you're wondering if I'm going to get to that, I've already gotten to that. I don't know how much time I should spend on the XO right now. It's kind of needs to be cleaned off. I don't have my cleaning rags around, but this is a very robust, and it really is built for kids, right? But very intelligent. Like, tell me even today, how many laptops have you seen in your lifetime that were affordable? Let's put that in. But even if they're not affordable, that have this swivel feature, right? And then you can lay it back down again and read it, like hold it like this and like read, or it's pretty heavy. So what happened here? Well, these depressed, in a good way, these brought down the price of laptops worldwide, I think, because these were sold for so little. Actually, they were given away to kids a lot. It was a charity project. And this is the kind of design science revolution kind of project that I was behind. Like, I didn't design or write software for this, but I certainly promoted it in my blog. And okay, so what, right? Some guy with a blog wove it through my blog, and here again I'm promoting it, even though it's a museum piece, right? This is the World Game Museum kind of thing. But the design science is the point in the Bucky Fuller syllabus. How we get traction and go forward are like smartphones have made a bigger difference in our lives than any politician, right? It's the sort of context, the stage settings almost are what change things, change the setting, change the environment. Don't change man, change the environment was his sort of gender neutral, no longer seen as gender neutral way of talking. So scheduling. Okay, so this will be a snapshot, and if you go back 2 videos, you'll see snapshot in time, that is a version. You'll see what I'm advocating. I'm advocating that in this age of distance learning and social distancing, a productive use of your time as a teacher, one way to go is to do what I do and create a stash of Jupyter Notebooks somewhere publicly accessible. And so there's your website. Make your website be your Jupyter Notebooks, I'm saying, and then embed in your Jupyter Notebooks YouTube such as this one to explain the Jupyter Notebook or to add context to the Jupyter Notebook. It's like you're a college professor, you're a calculus teacher. You can do calculus in your Jupyter Notebook. You can do math here. You can do Python. You can do symbolic stuff. It's really very like Mathematica. And there's an article, I should pull it up. Let's see how fast I can find it. Atlantic Monthly, DuckDuckGo, please. Atlantic Monthly, April. Let's see, scientific paper, Atlantic Monthly, Mathematica. That might help. And this article is about how, the scientific paper is obsolete. So they take one slant through the story. This is kind of intelligent journalism. I'd say what I got from Croth, I've gone back to my viewing history, but I'm going to tie this together. What I got from Croth is that our journalism steers clear of much technical stuff. Like, you don't want to scare your readers away, and you assume they're looking for either comfort or outrage. They want to be pandered to. It's basically, the media is, I think, their biggest failing right now is they are catering to public opinion, and the public doesn't really know what's good for it. That's the whole premise of medicine, right? It sounds patronizing and condescending. Why can't I just eat ice cream all day or whatever? But the point here is, if all you do is pander to negative emotions, as we call it in the Ouspensky literature, or Maurice Nicole here, negative emotions. If you want some context for what I'm talking about, check out The Work and stuff like this. All appropriate because Croth is something of a Jungian himself. We're talking about fighting the robotic nature of our nature. Fighting in the sense of, can our intellect, our intuition, our better nature, our higher thought faculties kind of reprogram how we are, or are we the victims forever now of our previously acquired habits? And you could say, the way we read and think in journalism is all habitual. One difference I noticed, as I mentioned, is when I went to studying the Japanese anti-nuke literature, like, what was it like to be anti-nuke in Japan? In the U.S., it's all about money, 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 whereas the Japanese were talking more in terms of engineering and the micro cracks that were forming. And, it was chemistry, it was statistics, it was technical. Whereas I feel like a lot of what we do in quote-unquote capitalism, if you want to call it that, is pretend that money is the foundational, realistic thing to talk about. And know-how doesn't matter. It's like, if we throw enough money at a problem, that's what it's going to take. It's all about priorities in terms of money. But, if all you know how to think about is money, do you have any real skills, right? I mean, when money becomes divorced from reality and becomes a game on its own, and you're really good at that game, can that be at the expense of, like, developing your engineering smarts? And I'm saying, you need to schedule yourself so that you don't become like an idiot who only can think about money, right? That would be a bad thing. Civilization would grind to a halt. So scheduling your time. What I do and what I recommend and what I think is useful here is I blend together concepts of operating system and how an operating system has to divide its time between running processes. It has to, first of all, create these processes. I just found an old pre-Linux Unix book in a free library. I've just been browsing through it again. We're talking from pre-Linux days, but Unix System 5, so and Berkeley BSD system, right? And it's fun to read that stuff, and I would like keep a lot of that in the curriculum. Of course, we're going into computers and we're looking at time sharing and time scheduling and process scheduling, multiple users, multitasking, right? Multitasking, time management, and then hook that in, connect that directly to your own personal time management capabilities. What are you learning to do in terms of time management in your own life? And step one, I think, is observation. Just watch yourself. And can you do that kind of from a neutral observer point of view, i.e., without judgment, without, oh, that's good, that's bad, and all this stuff? Or you see things you want to work on, you're not whipping yourself, right? So this is not about, oh, I have to. So many cults, you could say, their first step is you have to get on your knees and admit how bankrupt and destroyed your current way of being is, and that opens you to being completely reprogrammed or something. You're totally open to it because you're at the end of your rope or whatever. And I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm saying whatever your lifestyle, wherever you're at in terms of time management, get into observing it and thinking about just management in general. And here I would link to video games. In other words, we have first, second, and third person video games. In the first person, you're exploring. You might, there's all these examples I could cut to on YouTube. First person games, second person games where you're part of a team, but it's still kind of first person with your side. And then there's third person where you're kind of a God's eye view and you're overseeing like a battlefield. You're like a general and you've got your maps and you can see your action figures. Your software army is there in the game. But it's your viewpoint is third party. And that's kind of how an operating system would see the processes running on it in user space. So tying it to Jupyter Notebooks here, right? It's like Mathematica was, and Wolfram Research Mathematica is giving you the same capability of interleaving YouTube's. Well, I think it lets you embed YouTube's, but you can interleave your own text, your own pictures, and then your mathematics or your computations, like this kind of stuff. And what I also do under scheduling is think about your basic units of energy, right? And I'm talking Newtonian units. I'm talking about mechanics here. And energy as what? How do we get to energy? Well, here's action times frequency. So towards the end of this notebook, I'm encouraging you to look around, come down and take a look at all this on your own time, right? Schedule some time for my scheduling if you're curious to learn more. And then also, right, this is all free, this is all open on GitHub. It's not like I'm asking you to buy anything here. I'm not asking for you to send me your money. More, I'm asking for, let's talk less about money and more about, like, I haven't seen many virus stories in the mainstream that actually talk about RNA. And there's a lot of suspicious rumors going around about how the virus shows signs of being, like, made more lethal or something. It was being experimented with. It looks like an experimental thing. I've heard that rumor. But let's get down into that. Let's not leave that for rumor and sort of innuendo, right? If you want to talk about, if you're looking for more virus studies, just let's do the actual science of viruses in general and be simple at first, how they're different from bacteria and all that. I mean, you've got openings to be more scientific, like I was saying the Japanese were, around anti-nuke. Their arguments were engineering and science-based more than money-based. And I think it's a weakness in American consciousness that money is considered, you're really facing reality if you're talking about money. It's the basic, everything boils down to. If you don't know anything, money's not going to help. It's like you can't, money is not magical. It gets to be magical thinking, this money stuff. So finally, Jupyter Notebook, where did you go? Let's find it on, why is my history so little history here? Where'd my Jupyter Notebook go? I must have left it. There we go, Jupyter Lab, localhost. So what I'm suggesting is that you spend less time becoming money-minded and more time thinking about the design of things, the artifacts, okay, that we could have, like this, like I'm using now. And if you're into Black Lives Matter, what I would say is, do students get to play with Jupyter Notebooks and create them? Do they get to create YouTubes? Do they get to make their own music? I think UBI and the chance to perform, it sounds maybe like a dark Black Mirror episode, one in particular I saw, but in terms of having people have a good life, I don't think it takes 2 cars, a ranch-style house, and a 40-mile commute to an office job to earn a living, the right to live, to have a good life. I don't think you have to pay that price. I think there are lots of ways to be productive, creative, entertaining, have very active mind, and really into designing stuff and creating stuff and consuming other people's media, right? Which is not that, it's electronic, right? I'm not talking about mowing down forests. Yes, I know computers do hog energy. So let's see where to put our commitments here energy-wise, right? I'm talking about grids a lot. I'm talking about power. It's totally what we're talking about, what our priorities should be. I think what's amazing is how we sustain so many people who basically do negative work. They rebelize a city or just go around being menacing in ships and threatening each other. That's like negative work. You're just squandering resources there. And yet we still manage to get through the day with all these people who don't pull their own weight, right? Not that you really can. There is no way to pay back the sun, right? But to have negative impact because all you do is waste, really. I mean, we have so much savings to achieve just through cutting out the fat, right? So the last thing I wanted to do here was go to nuclear isotopes as an example. I was talking about Japan. I was talking about anti-nuke. Now, I thought when I started on this page that we would be in Fukushima by now with the Olympics. That's what would be happening right now. So it was going to be topical to talk more, and it's always topical because these substances are now in the environment permanently, right? After atmospheric testing and actual use of devices in the atmosphere, and the creation of them at Hanford and so on, the world's environment is permanently changed. And I say permanently in terms of, there are new elements around that will be here for millions of years that wouldn't have been here otherwise. And I'd say this whole idea of nuclear decay and the probabilities of what atoms turn into what based on fission, right? This has to be somewhere in your high school level knowledge, right? Don't wait till college. Don't think of yourself as like college educated just because I'm like saying this is minimum stuff, right? It's like knowledge of nuclear physics as used to be considered like really highbrow. It's like, wow, you know some nuclear civics. Well, now Big Bird needs to know this stuff. This is in range of Kermit the Frog, right? This is Sesame Street stuff now. And how do they measure, rads and, a sievert and what's too much radiation? And how do they figure that out? Tissue weighting, all these standards and so on. It's a good way to get into biology, DNA, and then we can talk more intelligently about 5G and 4G and 3G and all the Gs, right? It's like there's a lot, again, of innuendo, and I will call it junk science unless someone dignifies it with actual, more scientific content. And that's what we're trying to do here. Notice I'm collecting all these Jupyter Notebooks about biology and radiotoxins, and also just the math of exponential decay and half-life and so forth. There's a 5G video. Again, you as a teacher, you don't need to just rely on my videos or collection of videos. They're not my videos, but my curation, my approach is what I'm encouraging you to copy. And then, yeah, all this stuff is here on GitHub, and you can just hit the fork button and pick up where I am today. Check it out. I don't necessarily do a lot with pull requests at this point. Like, I would prefer people start their own Jupyter Notebook stash and go forward than that we all gather around me and try to make mine the best, right? Because I'm just creating an example, right? So I'm going to get back to my Orson Welles here pretty soon, even though we talked about that a while back. I have reborrowed it. I'm watching more of the special features. Once you've established your curriculum, and it's kind of a sphere, it's a ball, then scheduling means go back to things you were working on, take out the where you left off, and move the head forward, the playhead you could call it, and study more along those lines, right? So once you have a lot of branches about a lot of things in your thinking, then you're always going to have other stuff that you want to jump to, right? Like I've been studying, let's go back a little bit, Scientology and some Chinese philosophy, I think, and the polymaths discussion, this kind of stuff, right? So I'm using the YouTube history here as a metaphor for like task switching. Like, what if all you do is watch YouTubes? Well, that makes like a little model of a thought process. We could say, let's model a human being. They got to eat, drink, play video games, watch YouTube, and XYZ. And I know that sounds very dystopian to people, but what I'm trying to underline here is the energy requirements for learning and studying, which includes playing games and gamification of things like grid games and stuff. Like SimCity. Games can be serious simulations and fun at the same time and instructive. You need a minimum of like a GPU equipped computer. You need to play these games and to learn about your world. You need technology, and that shouldn't be something you need $1 million that you made because you're a self-made man or something, right? No, it's like the people who got here before you and have had time to figure out what's going on need to be planning for new people who are joining us and people who are already with us to have better access to information for self-education purposes. And that's what one laptop per child was all about, and that's what I'm all about here with the way I'm using my social media, right? So this is about expanding the sphere of opportunity, and it doesn't require huge amount of resources, what I'm saying. You don't need a 2-car garage and a ranch-style house and a 40-mile commute. You don't have to live in an, quote, affluent manner in that sense, which I could say is resource squandering too, right? Depends how you use your time, but a lot of stuff's just being squandered. It's waste, right? So we can talk about that, and we can talk about raising living standards based on improving the environment with design science, right? So that's an ongoing theme here. That's what we learn at the School of Tomorrow, which, by the way, just to remind you, is based on a movie called The House of Tomorrow, which is kind of a funny film. It's kind of a comedy, and I recommend it. It's There's also a book that goes with it if you want. And it's about Bucky Fuller. There we go. I was just getting to the DVD there. Cover. It's about a kid being groomed to be the next Bucky Fuller. And I thought, well, that's a good place to start. What would that kid be learning in that case? And rather than go back to the 80s or whenever this was, let's start with current tools and go forward, right? Be more futuristic than retro. But this will eventually become retro. All right, that's a nice little ramble for the morning. And time management. What are you going to do? Don't guilt trip yourself. Just golden opportunity to study and create curriculum materials if you're a teacher. If you're in lockdown or something and have the resources, you have the equipment, you have the bandwidth, and if you don't, why aren't we trying to help you get that as part of what we call school, right? School is not a fixed institution. This idea that you have to take a bus and go somewhere, how about school means right where you live, suddenly you've got more bandwidth and a better workspace. That's school. All right, that's real school. All right. Talk to you soon.